As I mentioned earlier, after Jerusalem fell after a revolt against Rome in 70 AD, Christianity itself began to separate itself from the Jewish religion. Previously, it had been under the protection of the Jewish religion as a subsect of the Jewish religion. But now it was challenged outside of that protection, and it also, for self-preservation, often began to more and more to separate itself from its Jewish roots, which started slowly changing some Christianity. But one of the challenges they faced was, um, they did not follow emperor worship, which certainly challenged challenge was a challenge against the Roman Empire. Um, the the Christians did not worship visible idols. Thus, ironically, the Romans and Greeks called them atheists. Christianity had great appeal to slaves in the lower class. And there was also a revival that occurred among the Roman military in the second and third century, especially in the third century. Um, but there was persecution at different periods of time during the second and third century. But in spite of this, Christianity continued to grow in the second century and reached as much as 15% of the Roman Empire. In the second century, there was a significant movement that was trying to counter some of the control, if you will, of that Christian leaders were trying to impart. Bishops were concerned about heresy, the rise and the growth of the Gnostic movement that challenged Christianity. And so they began to exert more control over Christianity and its beliefs. And one of those areas of control was that they believed or declared that only priests and bishops could exercise various charismatic gifts. And that was one thing that led to the rise of what's called the Montanist movement, and which began in the second century. It was really one of the first schisms or divisions within the early church. The Christian church declared it a heresy, but again, often, a lot of the things, movements we identify today with, especially those of us from an evangelical or Protestant tradition, we identify with a lot of movements that were declared heretical at the time. And one of these, I think, we should consider is Montanism. Yes, particularly one of its founders got a little out of hand and declared himself the oracle of the Holy Spirit. But nevertheless, after that, there were other Christians, and most significantly, somebody named Tertullian, that became part of this movement because they felt it was the most vibrant and authentic expression of Christianity at their time. Um, but this leads us to a question about, how do we balance between, um, this individual connection that we all desperately crave to have with God, and finding a balance between that and our collective beliefs as Christians. I call this a balance between orthodoxy, having right belief or right thinking, and orthopathy, having a right feeling or a right connection with God. And how do you feel your own church tradition has maintained this balance? There's always been a balancing act between these two ideas in church history. Um, there were a number of other schisms and challenges to Christianity at the time. Gnosticism was certainly the most popular of those, and I don't have time to go into detail on all these ideologies, but I encourage you to look them up. As a widespread ideology, early Christians didn't have much of a problem believing Jesus was God. They had more of a problem believing he was actually a human being. And one of the movements that really emphasized this was Gnosticism. They didn't believe Jesus was a human being. Traditional Christianity eventually declared that yes, Jesus was God, and fully human. Um, but in the midst of all these challenges, there was increasing persecution. There were people like Justin Martyr who tried to defend Christianity against the Roman emperor. There was persecution under Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor. There was also an interesting dialogue that was recorded between a very famous Christian author in the 3rd century named Origen and Celsus. And here we see a quote from Celsus. He says, especially at the end, he says, "Yet these Christians profess belief in a phantom God who appeared only to members of his little club, and then, so it seems, merely as a kind of ghost." The importance of realizing this critique is how pervasive the idea was that Jesus was merely a phantom and not necessarily a human being. That shows the impact that Gnosticism had on Christianity at that time. But he obviously offers other critiques that are sadly even common among critiques of Christianity today. Um, there was more persecution, more infiltration of the Christian faith. But again, Christianity continued to grow. Every major city, almost every community, and almost every segment of society had been touched by Christianity. At the end of the 3rd century, persecution against Christians had become most severe under the Roman Emperor Diocletian. Nevertheless, at the end of the 3rd century, the mother of a Roman general and a future emperor had become a Christian, something that would begin a significant shift in Christian mission, expansion, and expression. Uh, of course, this Roman general, his name was Constantine, and we'll look more at him and his influence on Christianity next week. But anyway, I look forward to all of your discussion this week on early Christianity, and we'll talk in our live lecture, our live session together, and also interact in our discussion forums this week. See you later. Bye.